So this is when Confused Matthew started to get fun and experimenty. When it came time to review the Matrix sequels, I thought I might be able to kill two birds with one stone. Movies have always been a hobby of mine, but another hobby I had for a few years at this time was philosophy. Years prior to this review, I was given a list of what I was told were the essentials on the subject, including Descartes' Meditation on First Philosophy, Plato's Republic, and good old reliable Baudrillard's Simulacra and Simulation. Most of the books were interesting and enlightening in some way. I remember being really impressed with Descartes at first, but as my way of thinking started shifting more towards the Aristotelian side, that kind of went away. But one thing I thought almost immediately was, what the hell was Simulacra and Simulation doing on that list? This was one of the most incomprehensible piles of gibberish I had ever read, especially after reading something like The Republic or Aristotle's ethical books, which, whether you agree with them or not, were at least coherent. A lot of the books on that list were difficult for me at first, only because of the translations for some of them, but Simulacra and Simulation seem to have been written with the sole purpose of having the reader not understand what is being said at all. And as I did more research, I discovered to my dismay that a great many in the field thought that was just what was going on. You come across a lot of debate in the field of philosophy, obviously. There are philosophers and philosophical points of view that some just believe are wrong. But Baudrillard was the first and perhaps only case where his philosophical peers were almost calling him a fraud. I didn't know a damn thing about philosophy when I watched the sequels the first time, and I figured you had to know something about it in order to understand what was being said in these damn things. But watching this again after immersing myself in the field, I came to understand that the gibberish that inspired this movie made the movie just that. Pure gibberish. I don't even understand why the Wachowskis did it this way. I mean, the first Matrix was inspired by Baudrillard, but it was a perfectly comprehensible, and I would argue, good film. This was babble combined with action scenes. So at this time, I thought it would be interesting to combine two of my hobbies for this review, my love of films and my love of philosophy. Well, you may be sad to know that philosophy is a subject that I lost all interest in a few years back. I haven't really thought about it or kept up with it in a while. And as I listen to this review again, guys, I don't know if it added anything to the review. I guess that's up to you. I mean, it's always up to you if you think anything I'm saying is worth anything. But I'm not sure you would lose anything if you took away the philosophical analysis or not. Everything I say about that subject may be true here, but I actually don't think you need to know anything about the subject to know that this movie was garbage, but that's me. I also used an alternate Matrix Matthew for this one, which was drawn by the very talented Allison, and I thought that was awesome. And yeah, this one was fun. It was my first four-parter, so clearly I had a lot to say. Oh, and by the way, I tried so hard to translate and understand the gibberish that was being spouted in this, I can still recite the speech from the architect from memory, all verbatim. It's all still there, burned into my subconscious. Now that's dedication to my craft. So I have more to say about the sequels in general, but I'll save some of that for the commentary in the next one. In the meantime, here's the review. Enjoy.
You know his words will get you farther than the film will ever go. Give him a moment of your time, he'll tell you what's wrong with the show. He knows what's good, what's bad, what's really bad. His face is just a sign. Say hello to Confused Matthew.
To ask what this means is to miss the point. The sentence beats readers into submission and instructs them that they are in the presence of a great and deep mind. Actual communication has nothing to do with it. These are the words of Denis Dutton, the Associate Professor of Philosophy at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, when he critiqued the writings of Professor Judith Butler, a post-structuralist philosopher, and I use that term loosely, in a journal article she published. Here's the sentence Professor Dutton was referring to. Go ahead and pause that on the screen and try to read it if you want. Like all forms of postmodern philosophy, it's useless jargon. Professor Dutton's words are the perfect way to open these reviews, because exactly the same can be said of the Matrix sequels for exactly the same reason. For to ask what these sequels are about is to miss the point. The films beat the viewers into submission and instruct them that they are in the presence of great and deep minds. Actual communication, storytelling, and narrative have nothing to do with them. Now let's look at what Professor Dutton had to say about the writings of Jean Baudrillard. He yearns to have intellectual influence, but must fend off any serious analysis of his own writing, remaining free to leap from one bombastic assertion to the next, no matter how brazen. Your place is simply to buy his books, adopt his jargon, and drop his name wherever possible. This is not an endorsement of Professor Dutton. I simply couldn't have said it any better myself. So why am I bringing this up? Well, as many of you probably already know, the Matrix franchise was heavily inspired by the philosophy of Jean Baudrillard, particularly his book Simulacra and Simulation. Now, for whatever it's worth to anyone, I've studied philosophy for nearly 3 years now, and what I have to say next, I feel is less of a review and more of a public service announcement. If you want sound, practical, and useful philosophy, read Aristotelian philosopher Mortimer J. Adler. Do not read Baudrillard. It's pseudo-philosophy. Rhetorical and fucking useless. And hey, what do you know? It helped inspire 2 rhetorical and fucking useless films. Now, I know Baudrillard has a tremendous cult following, and so I've probably just opened myself up to more criticism than ever before on this channel. So be it. Simulacra and Simulation was the philosophical equivalent of a placebo. You can toss it in the trash, there's nothing in it. And Baudrillard was a self-important pseudo-intellectual who had no point to make, had an undying love for hearing himself talk, and was criticized by his peers numerous times for indulging in willful obscurantism, refusing to qualify his claims, not defining his terms, and therefore writing unintelligible books. Hey, is this starting to remind anyone of anything? Now, while a lot of what has been said will become important later in these reviews, it may seem a little pointless because even Baudrillard said the Matrix films were a misunderstanding and distortion of his work, but I just wanted to give you the heads up about the already bad inspirations these films had. The Matrix Reloaded and Revolutions are of a particular hatred for me, because they combine 2 things that I seethingly loathe. Shitty sequels to what I thought was a pretty decent film, and bullshit postmodern philosophy. Therefore, these sequels have 2 different kinds of problems: shitty sequel problems and shitty philosophy problems. In the course of these reviews, I'm going to try to keep the philosophical critiques down to a minimum, as this is, after all, a movie review. But that's another thing. Why do I even have to discuss the problems of postmodern philosophy in a movie review? Movies are supposed to be for everyone, not just people who specialize in a particular subfield of a broad subject. But I digress. Let's get this thing started. So our first film, The Matrix Reloaded, opens with Trinity dropping a motorcycle onto a building which explodes for no apparent reason, and Trinity gets to some ass kicking. Once everyone's down, she reports that she's in, and the scene moves slightly ahead in time to Trinity falling out of a window while being pursued by an agent. She fends him off as best she can, but eventually gets shot and slams into a parked car. Then Neo wakes up, and we see that it was all a dream sequence. If you see my Star Trek First Contact review, you'll know how much I love dream sequences, but at least they only did it once this time. So here's the setup. The people in the Matrix meet and learn that there is an army of machines digging down to Zion, and all the ships are ordered back to Zion at once. However, Morpheus believes that this attack is a sign that the prophecy is coming true, and insists that one ship stay behind just in case the Oracle tries to contact them. One of the ships volunteers, and then the meeting gets interrupted by agents. A mysterious man gives a package to Neo containing an earpiece, and then 3 agents burst through the door. Neo then begins kicking some serious ass. I want to say this wasn't actually a bad way to open the film. We get all the information we need about the situation and the stakes, and then we get to some action that the first film became known for. So at this point, it was so far so good. So after this scuffle, they return to Zion. Now if you're like me, you left the first Matrix film thinking how nice it would be to see Zion. Well, it was nice. For about 10 minutes. Then if you're like me, you found yourself yelling, "No! No more Zion!" Somehow when Zion was mentioned in the first film, I didn't expect it to be quite this boring and mundane. This is the last human city? This doesn't even look like a city. It looks more like the inside of an anthill. and the citizens of Zion just look like a generic sea of extras. But what I really didn't get were the weapons all over the place. One of the things I found really interesting about the first film is when Trinity was explaining the EMP and said it was the only weapon they had against the machines. This is a very interesting position for the protagonists to be in because they can't even adequately defend themselves. They are forced to either hide, or if they're discovered, use a last resort ditch effort to subdue the machines. So where the hell did all these weapons come from all of a sudden? I guess Trinity really meant to say, it's an electromagnetic pulse. It's the only weapon we have against the machines. Oh, unless you count the Gatling guns we mount on absolutely everything we own except for the Nebuchadnezzar, I guess. So the ship lands, and Morpheus is greeted by what look to be a few security officers. One of the officers says to him, pissed off, and this translates into Morpheus being ordered to see Locke. No, silly, not that Locke. That Locke's interesting. Morpheus has to go see this Locke. Now, since they're going for a philosophical motif in these films, I just assumed that this character was named after the philosopher John Locke, kind of like the character on Lost. But, you see, there are two kinds of writers who make references in their films. Those who make references that mean something, and those that make references for the sake of it. This is the latter. The character on Lost is the partly philosophical but mostly theological foil for Jack, the man of science. So he's more Pascal than John Locke, but at least he's in the ballpark. This guy doesn't have any allegorical connection to John Locke. He's just an angry fuck. Now, if you're wondering why that is, it's because Morpheus used to be dating this guy's current girlfriend. And if you think this sorry explanation for a rivalry is trite and cliché, don't worry, this is the last time it will ever be mentioned or brought up in these films again. That's right, they took the time and effort to establish a plot point only to inexplicably abandon it in the rest of the film. And man oh man, get used to that. Meanwhile, Neo and Trinity are trying to find a moment alone with one another. They take an elevator to one of the levels, and it opens to a large handful of people who ask Neo to watch over their children in the Matrix, making this both the first and last time Neo's character will be interesting in these films. So the people of Zion are addressed, and Morpheus is called to speak. This is Morpheus, as you know, Mr. Bland, Stout, and Strong, so you'd think this speech would make him sound calm and wise. Instead, Fishburne delivers a performance that is so over the top, out of character, and just out of place, that the speech may as well have been delivered by another character altogether. I don't know anyone who saw this film that didn't laugh their ass off at this scene.
They have sent their armies! Machines!
I will never understand why Fishburne decided to play it this way. This is supposed to be the calm and wise Morpheus? I was able to take Cowboy Curtis more seriously than this. Welcome to part 2. So after Morpheus yells at everyone like a moron, the cave then erupts into a dance-a-thon, which lasts for a really long time, while Neo and Trinity find a quiet little spot to get it on. Yeah, don't bother developing their personal relationship any, just concentrate on the physical. That's where the real character development is. What do we learn about these two, or the people of Zion during this scene? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. This goes back to a big problem I had even with the original Matrix film. If I was going to make a film about humanity rising up against machinery, I would try to make the human characters act as human as possible. Instead, the Matrix characters are so one-dimensional that it's actually easier to identify with the machines. But this scene takes that problem to a whole new level. This looks like they're reenacting an episode of that old MTV show The Grind. How am I supposed to identify with this city and these people as representatives of humanity and the human condition if all they do is dance around like dorks and fuck each other? So eventually everyone goes to sleep, except for Neo and one of the councilmen, who comes off more like a clergyman as far as I'm concerned. Since they both can't sleep, he takes Neo to the engineering level and begins talking his ass off. He says that sometimes he thinks about all those people plugged into the Matrix, and when he looks around at these machines, he can't help but feel that they are plugged into them. Gimme a fucking break. This This is like listening to an ivory tower college professor bragging about how he doesn't use the internet or even own a television because he's unplugged and connected to the real world. Well, to them I say, I don't think you've gone quite far enough. I think you should stop using indoor plumbing because you're missing out on the real experience of crapping in the woods and wiping your ass with banana leaves. You're not plugged into machines. If you're plugged into anything, you're plugged into your needs, and the machines make it faster, better, and more convenient to fulfill your needs than ever before. That's a good thing. The councilman then raises the question, what is control? Which, despite what this dialogue would have you believe, is not a very difficult question. Control is to have mastery over something in the same sense that Neo brings up when he says that they control the machines in Zion, not the other way around. The councilman counters with, well, yes, we could smash the machines to bits if we want, but then what would happen to our lights, our heat, and our air? Which once again misses the point completely. The people in Zion are not under the control of the machines. If they are under the control of anything, it is once again their needs. Their heat, lights, and air. The machines are just middlemen. Whatever point the Wachowskis are trying to make here isn't just bad, it misses the mark altogether. So after the councilman's little speech, Neo asks what his point is, and the councilman replies, oh, there's no point. Well, at least he's being honest. Finally, the councilman says that he has no idea how the water recycling machines work, but he does understand the reason for them to work. And in that same turn, he has no idea how Neo is able to do what he does, but he believes there's a reason for that as well. Well, yeah, if something works, obviously there's a reason for its working. Any other tautologies you want to lay on us there, Counselor Useless? So going back to the Matrix, the ship that was asked to stay behind gets a message from the Oracle. They're just about to log out when a Smith intercepts this guy and takes over his body. The message gets to Neo, and the Nebuchadnezzar returns to broadcast depth. Neo connects to the Matrix and meets a strange man sipping tea. The man says his name is Seraph, and that he can take Neo to the Oracle, but first they have to have a dance. Fight. So they fight. Then finally Seraph apologizes and tells Neo that he had to be sure he was the one. Neo says he could have just asked, and Seraph replies, no, you do not truly know someone until you fight them. And man, oh man, is that wise and true. I gotta tell you, I have many friends and family members who I know intimately, and I can tell you right now that I've never been in a fight with any of them. What the hell is he talking about? You don't truly know someone until you do something as arbitrary as fighting them? Why not, you do not truly know someone until you skydive with them, or you don't truly know someone until you play PARCHEESI with them? Stop trying to sound smart. You're not. So Seraph leads Neo down a hallway of doors until finally taking him to the Oracle. She greets him by offering him candy, and Neo remarks that she already knows if he's going to take it. So Neo asks how he can make a choice if she already knows what he's going to do. And the Oracle responds, because you didn't come here to make the choice, you've already made it. You're here to try to understand why you made it. That's retarded. Choice implies thinking, deliberation, and understanding. Any action taken that does not involve these things are either instinctive or reflexive, but it's not choosing. We can make choices that are poorly thought out, inadequately deliberated upon, or misunderstood, but we cannot make choices that are not understood at all. This is precisely why human beings are capable of choice, whereas animals are not. Animal behavior is entirely instinctive and reflexive, whereas human beings are capable of choice because we are capable of conceptual thought. It's that thought part that seems to be missing in the Oracle's description of Neo's choice-making, so it's not choice-making. Note how the Wachowskis never actually explain how Neo is able to make choices without understanding them. For them, it's enough that they just say he does. And the reason they simply say it without explaining it is because it doesn't make any goddamn sense. Now, I could go into all kinds of philosophical outlooks on choice and choicelessness, but it would just be a waste of time. What the Oracle is saying here isn't in line with any philosophical principle I understand. It's not even in line with basic common sense. It's just rhetorical bullshit. If Neo is making choices and only understanding why he's making them after the fact, that's not choosing. That's... I don't even know what that would be. Random dart throwing maybe, but it's not choosing. This is so typical of postmodern philosophy. In fact, here's a nickel's worth of free advice for you all. If you want to excel in postmodern philosophy, if you want to be a postmodern philosopher tomorrow, then aside from taking simple concepts and overcomplicating them beyond measure with jargon, this is all you have to do. Just invert something. It doesn't matter what it is, it doesn't matter if reason led you to the inversion, it doesn't even matter if the inversion makes sense or means anything. Just do it. We don't understand our choices and then make them, we make our choices and then understand them. I'm not sitting here talking to you through my microphone, I'm sitting here and my microphone is talking to you through me. Brilliant! And if you think I'm just being overly sarcastic, if you think I'm just being too hard on postmodern philosophy, think back to Baudrillard. This is, after all, the philosopher who argued that the TV watches you. And no, I'm not talking about Yakov Smirnoff, but I may as well be. Yakov Smirnoff is probably the greatest postmodern philosopher alive, and he doesn't even know it. So here's what the Oracle lays on him. Vampires, werewolves, and aliens are exiled programs in the Matrix who escaped deletion. Neo has to go to the source, which is the machine mainframe, in order to save Zion, but to do that he needs the Keymaker, who is being held prisoner by a program called the Merovingian. Oddly enough, Neo asks more questions about the Merovingian than he does about how this is supposed to save Zion, or who the Keymaker is, or what he's for, which is frustrating because who the Keymaker is much more important, yet much less explained. So the Oracle sends Neo on his way, but then Smith shows up and begins another diarrhea out the mouth of dialogue. He destroyed Neo, but then Neo destroyed him. He knew what he was supposed to do, but he didn't. We're not here because we're free, we're here because we are not free, which is really two different ways of saying the same thing. And then he begins talking about purpose. It is purpose that created us, pulls us, drives us, defines us, and binds us. He is here to take from Neo what Neo tried to take from him. Purpose. This talk of purpose sounds vaguely Aristotelian, almost as if Smith was discussing Aristotle's concept of final causes. But this doesn't mean anything, it's just a bunch of dialogue dumped out the mouth to kill time until the big fight. Now, if the general consensus of this fight is what it is reported to be, then it seems everyone reacted to this fight in exactly the same way I did. Alright, yeah, get him, kick his ass, come on, yeah! Okay, that's good. Alright, we get the point. You can move on with the film now. Fuck! What the hell on with this? Welcome to part 3. So after the half-wire foo, half-high-end PlayStation 2 game fight, Neo, Trinity, and Morpheus go to see the Merovingian about releasing the Keymaker. It never made much sense to me why they're asking for his release when the Oracle already told Neo that he wouldn't let him go willingly. Just seems like an excuse for more dialogue. The Merovingian tells them that choice is an illusion given between those with power and those without, which I must say actually makes sense if he's speaking only within the confines of this film, and doesn't if he's not. He also tells them that the only real power is to understand why, or if you like, the cause of things. What this has to do with releasing the Keymaker, I have no idea, but what makes this almost interesting is that it doesn't seem like he's trying to impart real knowledge or wisdom to anyone. He's telling them how he sees the world and all the people in it, how he lives and how he rules. He has something over all those connected to the Matrix, and he loves it. Lambert Wilson plays this role with joy and conviction, and whether or not the dialogue means anything here, you at least enjoy watching him say it. My compliments go out to Lambert Wilson for delivering the first real character I've seen in this film, and of course to Monica Bellucci for wearing something low-cut. Do we really need anything else? Oh, sorry. So the Merovingian does exactly what the Oracle said he would do. He didn't give up the Keymaker. The three begin to leave, but then Persephone intercepts them and tells them she will give up the Keymaker if Neo kisses her as if he were kissing Trinity. Some days Neo must love his job. Neo agrees, the kiss takes place, and then they are led to the Keymaker. They're just about to leave with him when the Merovingian and his men come and find them. The reaction from Wilson here is just priceless, and one of the only moments in the film where I was actually enjoying myself. Persephone essentially tells him that this is revenge for him screwing around with another woman. And this was just a mere few minutes ago, I might add. So the Merovingian sixes cronies on all of them, including the great vanishing Doublemint twins. Morpheus, Trinity, and the Keymaker run away, while Neo stays to fight all the vampires and whatnot. So here we go again, another long and fruitless fight scene. Can anyone involved in this fight die? We've learned that the vampires and werewolves can only be killed by a silver bullet, and so far modern agents haven't been able to kill Neo. I really don't think the outdated programs stand much of a chance. So, what's at stake here, the running time? Finally, Neo drops all the assailants. He goes after the Merovingian, but he escapes through one of the magic doors, leaving Neo way up in the mountains. Lucky for him, Neo can fly. Meanwhile, Morpheus and Trinity escape with the Keymaker, but are being pursued. They try to find an exit, but there's only one, and it's off the freeway. This leads into what was supposed to be, indeed what was deliberately designed to be, the biggest and best chase scene in the history of film. Now, have you ever deliberately gone out of your way to try and do the best at something, whether it's telling the best joke at a party or making the best car? Well, the results of trying too hard are what this scene resulted in. This was a pathetic chase scene. Whose stupid idea was it to show half of what's supposed to be an exciting chase in slow motion? And even when it's in regular motion, the chase is just like all the fights in this film, over-choreographed and obvious. I've seen two amazing chase scenes in the last 4 years, both in Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, and they both put this thing to shame. And here's a confusing plot point for you. Eventually an agent gets to the Keymaker and tells him that he is no longer necessary and must be deleted. Well, if the Keymaker is no longer necessary, then why did the Oracle have them rescue him in the first place, and why was the Merovingian holding him at all? So they eventually get to the exit, and then we cut to the Keymaker, who begins explaining what has to be done now. There is a building. Inside this building there is a level that no elevator can go and no stair can reach. In this level there are many bathrooms. Some of those bathrooms have porcelain toilets and some do not. Inside those toilets are, you know what, why don't you talk properly? Basically he tells them this. Neo has to go through a door to reach the source, but the door is protected by the same security system as the building, and every alarm triggers a bomb. Someone has to shut down the building's security system, while others have to go and blow up a power station to eliminate the emergency backups. Neo can't be the one to do this because he only has a 5-minute window to enter the door once the systems are down. So Neo, Morpheus, and the Keymaker go in while everyone else gets to work. They all do what they're supposed to do, except for the ones that were sent to shut down the security system. Their ship was intercepted by machines and they all died. So Trinity goes in and shuts down the system. Meanwhile, the three get in but are intercepted by Smith. Where the hell did he get magic keys, by the way? A bunch of Smiths start fighting them, but eventually Neo fights them off and they get through the right door. So they're all in, but then we learn that the Keymaker was actually shot, and he dies. Now get this. Before he dies, he tells Morpheus that a certain door will take him back to the real world. So let's recap what Morpheus did during this scene. He went through the door, walked down the hall, got through another door, and was sent home. What the hell did he even go with them for if he had nothing to do? Oh right, Morpheus needed screen time. Well, he got it, and now we're about to reach the end of this thing. This had better be good. Welcome to part 4. So finally Neo reaches the source and goes in. What follows is one of the biggest steaming piles of bullshit I've ever seen in a film. Neo finds the architect sitting in a chair. He tells Neo that he knows he has many questions, but that he is in fact human. Therefore, some of his answers he will understand, and some of them he will not. Note the strategy at play here. The Wachowskis have just told their audience, you might not understand what's being said in this scene. That's okay. That's normal. That's just how smart the scene is. This begins the biggest get-out-of-jail-free card in the history of film. Now they can have the architects say whatever useless jargon they want as long as it's confusing enough, and they can get away with it because if you don't understand it, hey, they said you wouldn't, right? He begins explaining that the first Matrix was designed to be perfect, but that no one hooked up to the Matrix was able to accept the program. This is in fact the exact same explanation we heard from Smith in the first film, except here it's worded all stupid. He couldn't understand why no one would accept the program, so the Oracle was created to investigate. She discovered that people would accept the program as long as they were given an unconscious choice whether to accept it or not, which raises the question of why the Matrix was changed from a perfect world into a non-perfect one if that wasn't the problem. If all people need is a choice, couldn't they just choose or not choose to live in a perfect world just as easily as this one? So while this answer functioned, it was obviously flawed. Those that didn't accept the program had to be dealt with. Now, you'd think the easiest thing for them to do would just be to unhook the ones that didn't accept the program and destroy them. But no. The architect's solution was to create and populate Zion and let them be taken out of the Matrix into Zion. This has in fact happened 5 times before. There have been 5 ones before Neo, and Zion has been destroyed and rebuilt 5 times. It's hard to understand why the architect would decide to do it this way rather than just killing anyone who doesn't accept the program, unless you understand where the Wachowskis are coming from here. You see, they don't even know. So now Zion is going to be destroyed again, and the architect tells Neo that his function is now to return to the source and insert the code he carries back into the Prime program. After that, he has to select 23 people to rebuild Zion. He then tells Neo that if he doesn't cooperate with this process, it will result in a cataclysmic system crash killing everyone connected to the Matrix, and that combined with the destruction of Zion will result in the extinction of the entire human race. Wow! What a dilemma Neo is faced with here. If he doesn't cooperate, he will be responsible for the death of everyone plugged into the Matrix, who are the very people they've been trying to save. This really is an interesting thing to be at stake. Except it never happens. Neo doesn't return to the source, and in the very next film, everyone in the Matrix is just fine. Oh, the attack on Zion happens just like the architect says, but the people in the Matrix are all hunky-dory. So what happened to the system crash? Why didn't it happen? I mean, did the Wachowskis just forget? Were they just mixing up plot points in a big bingo cage and letting them drop into the screenplay and letting them slip their minds later? And here's another problem. Basically, what this scene is telling us is that the machines need Neo to get to the source in order to save both the human race and themselves. After all, the machines are powered by the human race. So if they need Neo to get to the source, why the fuck hell did they make it so damn hard for him to do it? He's got to deactivate a security system and blow up a power station, and he's only got 5 minutes to get in? Why not just create a blackout themselves and give him as much time as he needs? I mean, do they want this to happen or not? So finally we reach the apex of this scene's bullshit. The architect explains that Neo and the other 5 ones were designed with a contingent affirmation that was meant to create a profound attachment to the rest of their species. Yeah, a contingent affirmation. You know, as opposed to a necessary affirmation. Contingent affirmation literally means a positive declaration that is capable of being otherwise. Why is this a gratuitous line? Because with the rare exception of self-evident statements such as there cannot be a round square and a thing cannot exist and not exist at the same time, every affirmation we make is a contingent affirmation. Contingent is implied in the word affirmation. This is a typical exercise of verbal sleight of hand in postmodern philosophy. Just stick in as many words as possible to unnecessarily complicate what you're trying to say. You'll sound much smarter that way. But while this overwording is obnoxious, it's not altogether incorrect. What's real bullshit is what comes next. The architect explains that the other ones experienced this contingent affirmation in a general way. Now, I'm not even sure you can affirm anything that isn't particularized, but whether you can or not, it turns out that Neo's contingent affirmation is particularized. His contingent affirmation is love. His love for Trinity. So first of all, How the hell can the architect possibly know that this contingent affirmation is going to give them a profound attachment to the rest of their species if he doesn't even know what the affirmation is going to be from 1-1 to the next? Second, how the hell is Neo's love for Trinity going to give him a profound attachment to the rest of his species if the only attachment it gives him is to Trinity, and he will sacrifice the rest of his species to save Trinity? Was this just a glitch, or is this just a shitty architect? So basically what this scene is telling us is that in order to create a profound attachment to the rest of their species, the ones were programmed with a generalized or particularized, in other words, arbitrary, positive declaration that is capable of being otherwise. That doesn't mean anything! But hey, it sure sounded smart, didn't it? The beginning and middle of this scene was total bullshit, so it's only fitting that the end be bullshit as well. The architect tells Neo that he has a choice between two doors. One leads to the source and the salvation of the human race, the other leads back out to the Matrix where Neo can save Trinity from the agent that's killing her as they speak, except this will mean that he dooms humanity. The problem here is choice, but the architect already knows what Neo is going to do. Okay, so he already knows what he's going to do. He already knows that Neo is going to save Trinity rather than return to the source. So, what, he can't do anything about it? How about just call off the agent that's killing her? Or better yet, have the agent hold her hostage and tell Neo that she'll be killed unless he returns to the source. Neo will still be making a choice, it will just be between two different options. This has got to be the worst architect in the history of fiction or fact. And I still don't understand what the agent was talking about who said the keymaker was no longer necessary. Based on everything we've heard in this scene, it seems he's very necessary. Oh, that's right, the Wachowskis were just making this up as they go along. What was I thinking? So Neo bursts out the door and saves Trinity. They all return to the real world, and Neo explains that the prophecy was just another system of control, and that if they don't do something, Zion will be destroyed in 24 hours. Actually, the architect never said anything about 24 hours. He never mentioned a time at all. But since there's no actual screenplay here, we can't expect Neo to remember that. So the machines then attack and destroy the Nebuchadnezzar. They're just about to kill the crew when Neo stops them by magic and then faints. Another ship picks them up, and Neo is left unconscious. Him and the guy that Smith took over. We're now halfway down the rabbit hole, and it's pretty obvious that there's nothing but shit waiting for us at the bottom.